I am here with my friend Kiran, who also is a parenting coach and a really close friend of mine. We were in a birthing class together, but we were friends long before that. And prior to being a parenting coach, she was actually a teacher. So, as you guys know, I've been working really hard to bring together professionals to talk with you about some things that we're facing right now as we're dealing with COVID and staying in place, and just, parenting stuff we've been dealing with forever. So these are tips that regardless of what's going on in the world, I think we can take back with us. But I asked Karen if she would come on and share some things with us so we can go ahead and get started. How are you, Karen?
I'm doing, as well as we are all doing, as well as could be expected, I think, under the circumstances. My kids are on spring break this week, so that's been pretty interesting. We're managing. My husband's working from home too, so it's just the little things I think that keep us going. The dogs, they get us out. We're trying to just get some fresh air. I have to, get them not to just be sitting on the screens all day, that kind of stuff. So anything that gets them up, them moving, makes me happy. And we're doing okay for now.
Awesome, awesome. And Karen and I both have kids. Oddly enough, we had kids within a week of each other. She has two girls, 7 and 10, and I have two boys, 7 and 10. So, but Karen works with parents with kids of all ages, so she can definitely talk about that. We're also on spring break this week, so I'm sure like these kids will be running in here at some point to ask me for whatever stuff. Right now, I think they're building some Matchbox cars out of CDs.
Oh, there you go.
So what can parents do to stay sane right now? I hear a lot about drinking has gone up. Like I heard a statistic of like 66% or something like that during shelter in place. I think mine has gone up like 200%. I normally don't drink very much at all during the week. And now I'm like, oh, it's 5 o'clock and where's my tequila?
Yeah. We could have brought a cocktail onto the call.
Right.
I feel that I think this situation is so inherently frustrating and anxiety producing that all of those ways that we normally have ways of either, going, seeing a friend, doing something, getting out of the house, dealing with those feelings that can be here regardless, but I think it's just the volume is up so high on those feelings. And I think it's not just for us, but it's also for the kids. They're missing their friends, they're missing their structure, they're missing their teachers, they're missing the amount they usually learn. And this was just thrown at us, such a curveball. And I don't think our schools were that prepared. I don't think we could have been prepared, and definitely not the kids. So I think in the midst of all of that, just extreme emotion. It really is extreme. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's extreme fear and danger just on a medical level, but I think on an emotional level, it's to really start looking. The sanity, I think, comes from just acknowledging that, not trying to ignore that or trying to avoid that. I think it's partly just sometimes taking a moment to feel it. I also have a family member, my twin sister, who's in the medical field. And so the emotion around just being so scared, for her, there were a couple days where I've just had to go in the bathroom and, just have a really good cry. And I think sometimes those allowing that emotion to come up and release is something that our bodies need. I think it's something that our hearts need and our minds need, because it's like running too many, programs on your computer or something in the back. Those emotions are like that for us in our bodies and our hearts and our minds. And I think they're taking a lot of energy, whether we acknowledge them or not is kind of immaterial. They're just going in the back and sucking our battery. And I think if we pause and look at that and just acknowledge it, it's, just take a breath sometimes. I think journaling too, from a more mind space, is a great way to try to take care of how much emotion we're really carrying right now. And I used to be a high school history teacher, so I also think it's a great like primary source of just what is this thing? Everybody's sort of fumbling their way through this. It's scary, it's anxiety provoking, it's frustrating, it's all those things. It's so constraining, the tightness, you know, and
Yeah.
just being able to find ways to relate to that, whether it's a practice, the mental thoughts, noticing how hard are we being on ourselves, how hard are we being on the kids, how much are we holding ourselves to the same standard emotionally that we had before this happened. It's not possible to do that, you know what I mean? So just giving a little bit of space, having some ways of breathing, having some ways of moving the body, moving all that energy through the body somehow, whether it's through an actual cry or a good sweat. Just getting some fresh air, I think, is super key for everybody. The journaling, I think, is key. And, you know, depending on your personality, if you're an extrovert, oh my gosh, that's a whole other layer. I think having, you know, chats with people that you just really care about, and trying to create some time to.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. I know I've been through two things in my life that were like especially difficult. One was the death of my brother, actually, which happened a few years ago. And then the other, which was very shocking to me that it was so difficult for me, but actually when my parents were separated, like really late in my life, it actually was just this very odd, very emotional experience for me that completely caught me off guard. And so when you said, the thing about just feeling things, actually, I would say in both instances, that was what got me through, was like, actually, rather than running to the tequila bottle, which of course we all want to do at the end of a long day, was just really sitting there and like concentrating on where I was feeling grief and like what that felt like, and just absolutely feeling every minute of it. And I don't feel that way about being home with my kids. I don't think it's at that level. But to your point, I think like not always running away and actually giving yourself some time to kind of be like, all right, like this is not that easy. And, you know, like you're dealing with Anita's situation, and, you know, we all, I think most of us have been touched by this in some way. We've at this point, like known of someone who's died, certainly all know people who are sick. And so it's starting to be, I had a mastermind, I have a mastermind group, and I think somebody in there had mentioned there's 11 people, and someone had mentioned, oh, my grandfather, or I think it was his great uncle, had died the night before of COVID. And then 2 other people in the last 24 hours out of 11 had lost someone. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like,
this is the great equalizer of everybody. It's
yeah,
like we're all in the same boat. Yeah, a good friend here in Palo Alto, her father in London passed, and it, you know, she can't go, she can't be there. It's so rough. It's
yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, so with the kids, like one of the things that I notice is just, and we're not, I'm by no means like the best parent on earth, you know, I think that, you know, different kids require different things. And I have 2 kids that are very different from each other. Like Nikhil, as you know, my oldest, he's very structured. And then my youngest is like anything but. And so trying to find, like, first of all, should parents be worried if their kids are not learning enough? Like, I don't think my kids are learning very much right now. Like, do we need to worry about, like, are they going to be able to catch up? Like, and what is the best way? Should we just let them watch TV for 2 months and not worry at all? Or should we like be like hyper vigilant about making sure that they're doing certain activities to like stay caught up?
Yeah, great question. And I think, and this is what, you know, when you're teaching in a classroom, you're always trying to meet the needs of such diverse kids and diverse learners. So it's kind of a classic educational problem, right? But I think that, first of all, I'll answer some of the questions you asked. especially the first couple weeks when you're transitioning, I think, which we're sort of, and now you've got a break and I've got a break too. So I'm letting spring break be a break for the most part, although I'm trying to keep them doing certain things so that next week or not, it's not just a complete flop, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But because kids do respond, and their inner sense of safety and self-regulation is partly influenced by like routines and consistency. So, and we're all that way to a degree. But I think so. The first big question, should we stress about the kids not learning? I mean, the way I think especially these first couple weeks, there is no way they're going to be learning the same amount that they were learning at school. I also want to emphasize this fact that, and I have a visual of this, but I'll try to just describe it without the visual. The Dan Siegel has this really cool visual that I always use in my presentations that's called the healthy mind platter. And it's like the serving platter, and it has a bunch of different things on it. Only one of the things on that healthy mind platter is what he calls focus time, which is what we think of as school, super academic, books, learning, doing all the academic. The other things on the platter are, so kids to have, humans to have a healthy mind, he says we need focus time, we need physical time, we need connection time, we need time in, we need you know, it's like 6 of those things on this platter. So it's kind of getting at all the different parts of development, the cognitive only being 1 of 6. The other things, remember, when our kids go to school every day, as a teacher, when I'm in the classroom and I'm designing a lesson, sure, I'm thinking about the facts, and I'm thinking about they have to take that test at the end of the year, they have to do well, or when they grow up and they're having a conversation about history, I want them to know the difference between, you know, this country and World War II and this country or whatever. It's just knowledge. I want them to have that. Of course, that's my job. But additionally, I am thinking about, as a teacher, that platter. I'm thinking about when kids develop, their minds develop, their hearts develop, their bodies develop, their social skills are developing. So partly what they do every day in school, it's a very interesting mix of all of those things. So I think as long as your kids are sort of tapping into some aspect of learning, it's a very global thing, learning. It's not just, you know, facts. And so to try to think about it that way, that let's say, and I have a resource, if you, let's say you put up 5 goals of the day, and on that list of goals, it says, you know, learn your subjects, talk to a friend, get some exercise, help mom with some chore, and get fresh air. Those are your 5 goals. You know, those are really great goals to stick up on the wall, and to sit with kids and have them generate like a chart where maybe it looks like kind of a tic-tac-toe board, and in each square of that board have the kids use those 5 goals to write down different tasks.
Right.
And so it can be, you know, do a Zoom, walk the dog, help mom, go take a break, and, you know, walk outside and do math, do social studies, you know, and let them use that every day to sort of check off or cross off like a tic-tac-toe board. And the more I think we can let kids sort of self-generate some of their activity, the less resistance we're going to get. Because I also think noting ways in which they are getting it right now is really important, kind of a management technique. Appreciation goes a long way. And I've noticed for a couple weeks, I mean, my kids, the first few days, they were really on it. You know, of course, that's not going to last for months on end, because they're human beings. But I'm trying to catch them doing things right. So like, oh, I noticed you know, you picked up that stuff off the deck without me having to ask. Like, that's so awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being helpful, you know, so that if we sort of ratchet down the pressure around pure academic achievement, which is high here anyway, and it's like, you know, it's always in the background, but this point in time with everything that's going on, I think the way we need to think about having a good day is just getting it day by day, having those mix of goals, having the kids choose some things that are, you know, good for them healthy wise and learning wise, and maybe have a weekly way of assessing. Like my kids, I'm having them at the end of the week, they create a presentation throughout the week. And even my little second grader like presented on some silly thing last week, like fruit, you know, but she ended up learning about fruits she never knew about, and like that other countries eat. And she's just in second grade, you know, so what's the big deal? But she was just standing up at the end of the week. She did that with a little paper. My older one did like a PowerPoint about plastics in the ocean. And, you know, it gave them something to work on that they really enjoyed at the end of the week. They had fun, that we cared about listening to them. And it wasn't following the curriculum, but that's okay. You know, I think at this point, I do want to see kids learning, but it's going to go off script a lot. And I think that's okay, you know?
One of the things I really like that you said, you were calling them goals, but like a lot of the, like on my team, we talk a lot about outcomes, which is the same, like because the outcome is actually getting fresh air, right? Yeah. So the activity could be basketball, it could be playing soccer, it could be going for a walk. There's like all different ways to get that. And I don't know if you've ever read Danielle Laporte before. She has that. Yeah. So she has that thing about like core desired feelings, right? It's like the same thing. It's like deciding like actually how do you want to feel, and then figuring out like what kinds of things go in there. And this could actually be some really good time for us to be having those conversations. I was showing Nikhil, he has, initially we were letting him like design his own schedule, but his teacher actually sends him a schedule every day. Roche's teacher sends him nothing. So, and he doesn't like to design it, and he doesn't like to go on things. So anyway, that's all a whole nother thing. But Nikhil, you know, he puts a lot of like self-imposed stress on him. So he was showing me his schedule one day. He's just like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I said, well, you know, decide like how much time do each of these activities take? And he's like 15 minutes, 5 minutes. There was like 30 minutes left in the day. I was like, great, there's 4 activities. You can get 3 of them done based on your timing in the next like 30 minutes. So maybe just knock those out. And then there's just 1. And he was like, oh, like, you know, so it was like a good opportunity for me to talk with him about things that we talk about at work all the time, like how to be productive with time. Right. And so the next day he said, yeah, I feel like I was able to learn a little bit more about how to do that. And so we've been kind of trying to look at his schedule that way.
Great job. Yeah. That's awesome. And I think to your point, since parents are so good at so many things, like you run a team, you run this incredible business, to realize that you can use a lot of that with your kids right now. I think it's so important not to discount that, because it is like managing a team. It is about having conversations about time management, or about goal setting, or about how you feel about yourself, or about whatever thing arises between you and your child. That is really valuable interaction, and it's lifelong learning. Even if it's not about the tests they're taking next week or that they would have normally been taking, it's okay, because those skills are going to stick with them probably more than any other thing they would have learned in school. You know what I mean? So I think that's great.
It seems like there's some teachers, like I have one friend, I won't name her, but you know her, but she, gosh, you know, she has a 7-year-old, and the school, the stuff they're giving is like 6 hours of like academic work. And of course she's trying to do her job at the same time. And I was just like telling her, I'm like, just say no, you know, like really, like no one is doing it. There's no way. Right. So I'm just wondering, like,
are the kids doing it, or are they really pushing back? Because I think
he is pushing back hardcore, and she's like crying like multiple times a week. Like, it's just horrible that she has to be going through this. And, you know, like for what, right? He's in 2nd grade or 1st grade, I think. It's just like, you know, come on. Like, I just think there's no repercussion here, right? Like the schools are not going to flunk your kid. Like, just do what you can. And, you know, I don't know. I think it's just okay every once in a while to say F it. Like, I'm not doing that.
because of your first question, which is about sanity, if these, and a lot of what I work on with parents as a coach has to be with it has to do with the locus of our attention and our sort of philosophy and our, family mission, if you will, which right now we're not only in charge of the family mission, we're now in charge of the educational mission, which we really are in charge of all the time anyway, but it's just
Right.
like magnified right now. And in some ways I was reflecting before, when you invited me on the call, just about something that seems important to say right now. I think that it's actually such an opportunity to kind of revisit a lot of that kind of stuff around what is my mission or vision about my kids' education. What do I really, of course schools are amazing and there's such a big support to us, but do we always want the school to be calling the shots as far as what we believe and value about our kids' learning? And I would say no. I would say that we are always, not that we don't want to cooperate, or those issues can arise in my community a lot where parents are just kind of difficult for no reason, so I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the locus of defining it is really up to us, and that's empowering, and I think right now to be able to practice that and to be able to decide, sometimes with the school they're sending so much stuff to us, they're just as anxiety provoked right now as anyone, and they're trying to do a good job. And so this friend who's getting this hours and hours of emails, the school is just doing the best they can too, but I think it's ultimately going to be up to us to be the interpreter and the decision maker around where the limits need to be, for everybody's well-being and sanity. And if there are going to be kids out there that they want to do that, and good for them. If that works for a kid, great, knock yourself out. But if another kid needs more of that platter of all those other things to feel grounded, at the end of the day, if your kid is getting through a day and they're painting their nails for 45 minutes, but then they read a book for an hour, it's all good, because you sometimes got to kind of throw them a bone so they will motivate to do something else. People are
in terms of being able to motivate them, I mean, like you mentioned, like catching them doing things right, which I think is great. I mean, I think we're a little past star charts though. That worked really well at one time. And I don't know, maybe it still could work. Like Nikhil loves that stuff. Like he loves like badges and stuff. What are some ways that like we can have a little carrot that we can dangle out there that's like, hey, get to 3 o'clock without bugging mom and dad because we're both working, and then there's this, or like, I don't know, what suggestions do you have?
I would say and it's again, different kids are motivated by different things, but and you can have this conversation too definitely with your spouse, and even sitting with the kids to discuss. But like, let's say you think about it as a week by week process. Maybe at the end of the week, there's going to be some kind of cool thing that the kids value, whether it's like you're going to order their favorite kind of food, or you're going to have a family movie and they get to choose which one, or each evening, if you need to get them through to a certain time because you're like super devoted to other things, which is challenging, I would suggest maybe if you have even 15 minutes before you kind of lock into work mode, to get a little morning meeting at the breakfast table so that you're loading up, if their emotional cup, you're kind of putting in the connection in the bank right in the beginning of the day. Because you'd be surprised, I think, for most kids, as much as we can think of these sort of do this, receive this, like a very sort of quid pro quo in terms of motivation, or dangling out rewards, the reality is that internal way that their brains work and the way they work, if that connection comes in the beginning of the day, it's actually very inherently motivating to them to get that,
Mhm.
So I would do a mix of like concrete things, but also just emotional things, like fill that cup as much as you can before you go into meetings. The more you do that, I think the longer they have like something to be drawing from throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, maybe you're closing their day with also something that's connection oriented, like you go on a walk together, you play a game together, something that they really makes them feel emotionally full, you know, because I would suggest those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
yeah, does that make
Special,
sense?
back to special time.
It's always about that. Yeah. And some,
uh,
yeah,
I think that's good. I hadn't thought about it that way, but we've been doing morning walks,
that's great.
which is like the, in lieu of like commute time, right? So we've been going out, and it's been one of my favorite things about this break that we're on, because what I've noticed is that as we're out walking, and there's not, you know, we're just, there ends up being like very organic, like interesting conversations. Like sometimes we talk about the architecture of houses, which of course, you know, I love to talk about houses and yards, and I'm, you know, they're going to be such nerds, like, because I'm
I
like,
love it.
let's talk about like how you would redesign this house. And then I'm like, no, that, you know, so we're doing all that. And then, but a lot of times things come up, like, you know, sometimes Nikhil will say like, what do you think about this whole COVID thing anyway? You know, and sometimes it's like very serious conversations.
And
Which I,
that's processing it, because as much as they're trying to learn all day, they're also like the rest of us, like, WTF is going on here with this thing?
yeah,
And they're kids, you know, so that it's like, what, how do I even make sense out of this, you know? So the fact that he's bringing that up with you is so huge, and it's so I think of those conversations as so juicy, because it's like,
yeah,
this is a kid who's trusts you and really wants to try to process his sense of the world with you, you know.
right.
And it's a gift to get to do that, I think, with kids. And the fact that you're making space to do that is, I think it's filling their cup a lot, and it's filling your cup, you know. So
And
that's
it
what.
doesn't seem to come up the same way, like when we're playing checkers or whatever, even though, like, you know, like, I mean, right now I'm with them more in the evenings than I normally am. It's like, you know, 5 to whenever, 5 to when they go to bed every day. But those conversations are limited to the walk. It's so interesting to me, right? Like they don't, it's not the same. Like it's such a deeper conversation when we're out, there's
Mm.
nothing else around, and we just can talk. And that's been, so maybe that has been, the filling up cup time. Not that they're perfect angels, because they're not, but
Interesting too is that this period, we're just all getting through it day by day, but that practice that you've developed very organically with your son could end up being something that you do now until he
yes,
graduates high school, because you've
right,
learned about your relationship, you know.
right.
And I think that is like, so the priceless parenting wisdom stuff. So that's great. And I think even as they do get older, in middle school and high school, you know, sure, they'll roll their eyes and do all their, you know, moody stuff, but they would still want to do something like that with you, especially if you see how much it's grounding him now, you know.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
great. And just, you know, don't be hard on yourself. I think you are doing a lot right. And I think to try to note that, just like with the kids, to try to note that for yourself, that you are doing some really good parenting with them. And, you know, of course, the sibling stuff, it's been interesting to watch with my daughters. You know, because their relationship tends to fill a certain role normally, and then they also have these like very close friendships that
mm-hmm.
fill a certain role. Now all of that, what I've observed happening, and I don't know if this resonates for others because my kids are girls, but it's sort of everything's being compacted into their relationship, and they're trying to figure that out. And I think for the most part, they have their own rooms. They started sleeping together in my.
Oh, interesting. Oh, you paused on me.
Can you
Oh,
hear
there
me?
you are. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because they're just like, we need company. We need, you know, it's so that's been interesting. And they squabble, you know, and they get on each other's nerves. My older one's bossy and the little one can't stand that, stuff like that. But for the most part, I think as long as they're having calls with their own unique friends that keep them in their own little, you know, space, that, you know, the siblings without rivalry thing.
Yeah.
It's like they always need to know who they are and that I'm unique and I'm valued for who I am. And so that kind of stuff keeps them in their domain.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe these special time practices that you're learning, like if the older one really likes the walk, maybe the little one really likes to play the checkers. I don't know. They can have different things that can help. And, you know, and the reality is we're all in close quarters. Things are going to happen, but I wouldn't expect there to be no. So if anything, it's going to be more. Yeah. But, you know, there are things just to try to help them. You know, for me, when I notice this stuff coming up, if I'm there, it's easy. You know, I correct the behavior and I say, you need to watch your tone and be more considerate, etc. It's what's hard is when you're away and you're in meetings and you can't pay attention. That's where this stuff becomes a big challenge. So whether they need to pick some spaces, independent workspaces for a certain part of the day, that could help take the edge off. And maybe just increasing their contact with some their friends can also, I would say those would be the biggest things. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Kiran. So tell us, like, if somebody wanted to have some professional parenting advice, like what's the best way to get in touch with you? Of course, I'll put everything into the email in writing, but tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So there are two things that I'm offering right now. One is just a kind of community thing because I want to do something to help. And that's that I'm having a call on Thursdays from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific. And it's just a community call. And I've had it for the last 3 weeks, a good number of parents coming, between 10, 20 parents. I do a meditation, grounding everyone, helping everyone just have a nice space. And then we do there's open sharing time, and it's really just a listening circle to offer emotional and listening support, and lots of laughs and good sharing in that call. So please help yourself to that if that's useful. And I'll send Ruth the login for that. In addition to that, if you want to talk about your family and all of the kinds of things we were talking about today, you could just call me or email me. And I usually offer about a 20-minute chat just to hear a bit about what's going on. And based on that chat, either provide some help during that call that just kind of keeps you going, or give you some info about other services that can be supportive to you and your family.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kiran. I really appreciate your time. It was great chatting with you today.
You too, Ruth. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
All right. Talk soon. Bye.